International exchange programs promise opportunity, culture, and safety. But when oversight fails, some students find themselves isolated, exploited, and far from home. Welcome to Crossing the Line, the podcast from the National Center to Stop Educator Sexual Misconduct, Abuse, and Exploitation. I'm your host, Joelle Casteix. Today, we're joined by Danielle Grijalva, founder of the Committee for Safety of Foreign Exchange Students. For nearly 2 decades, Danielle has been tracking cases of abuse, exploitation, and neglect involving international students placed with host families around the world, exposing dangerous gaps in oversight inside a multi-billion-dollar exchange industry. Danielle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Joelle.
So you founded the Committee for Safety of Foreign Exchange Students in 2005, 2006?
In 2006.
What first made you realize that exchange students were facing serious safety risks?
Well, it stemmed from my time working as a local coordinator with what was called the Center for Cultural Interchange, today known as Greenheart Exchange, and I happened to be a local coordinator, and it was my regional coordinator that needed to find 2 homes for 2 boys that were accused of downloading porn on their host father's computer. And long story short, my sister was able to take the boy from France, and it was later that evening that she called to say, "Danielle, you really need to speak with this boy. I can't get him to stop crying." So I spoke with him, and wow, what an eye-opener. He and his host brother were being groomed for sex by their host father. They were encouraged to walk around the home in their undergarments. They were photographed without their permission while sleeping. They were asked to watch pornographic sites with their host father. There was pornographic material strewn about the house, and the boys just wanted to get their visa and their passport and get out of there. But the boys were falsely accused of not only downloading porn, Joelle, but they were accused of ransacking the house and stealing from the safe, which was not true. So I spent a good hour on the phone with the young boy from France, and multiple times alcohol was provided to the boys, and it was just a really bad situation. And the more I tried to give these boys a voice, I was laughed at by my regional director.
So then what came from that?
Well, I continued to pursue. I understand that the principal of the high school did contact the Indio Police Department. The police responded, and from there, the boys were removed from the home. The boy from France went with my sister, and the boy from Germany went to a family in Texas. But the more I tried to bring awareness to the situation, just as a full-time mom from my home in Oceanside, I was met with, "Well, who are you, and where are you calling from?" And the real clincher was when I was told, "If what you're telling me is true, why am I not hearing this from the boys themselves?" And boys don't want to come forward with what they've endured. So I formed the Committee for Safety of Foreign Exchange Students, and it was in 2005, Joelle, that a 2-sentence blurb was mentioned about the Committee for Safety of Foreign Exchange Students and what we were doing. And I received hundreds upon hundreds of emails and letters and calls from people across the globe saying, "Good on you for what you're doing. This is what happened to me 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago." And it lives with them today. And I became aware that this was a widespread problem.
So, I mean, there's so much to grasp there, because I was an exchange student in college. I was over
Fabulous.
18. I had certain skills, but I can't imagine as a high schooler, you're a minor, you're stuck, you can't drive, you can't go places without permission, and now you're being exploited. And so you've seen hundreds of cases. What kind of patterns are you seeing? What are the patterns that you have been able to identify in these cases that have been most prevalent?
Great question. What it primarily starts with is there are more students than there are host families available. It's the Department of State that will release a DS 2019 form for the student to be able to obtain their visa, and the Department of State shells out between 30 and 33,000 of those forms annually for students to come to our country. Joelle, we don't have 33,000 homes for these students. And given the fact that the local coordinators get paid a stipend with bonus points and bonus incentives for placing X amount of students, I believe some have gotten greedy, accepting more students that can be properly supervised. So this is why up to even a dozen have been found residing in their area representative's basement, sleeping on pool tables in a garage, sleeping in sleeping bags. And then there's the language barrier. They have a very hard time with American culture. What is this normal for Americans, is what I'm experiencing, right? And it's the language barrier that is also the greatest problem.
So these are minors who are coming over under the Department of State. Why is there so little oversight?
Well, these agencies are multi-million-dollar agencies involved in a multi-billion-dollar industry. And what's so sad, I have heard this time and time again, the parents tell me that by way of paying extravagant program fees between $18,000 to $30,000 to come to the United States, they think they are going to be assured a positive, safe stay. But what really concerns me is that the Department of State balks against full fingerprint criminal background checks on host families. They only provide a name-based background check. So this means hosts with convicted felonies on their record, if you will, for example, they have been allowed to host. And when the student begins to experience any uncomfortabilities in the home, they are immediately silenced. It's during an orientation when they first arrive in the United States that they're asked to sign what's called a code of conduct. And that allows the student to only go within the industry, within their agency, and not to step outside the agency, not speak with a trusted school official or a friend's mom. They want to keep it internal so that they can preserve their reputation.
So we have schools where if you want to be a janitor, you're fingerprinted.
Or a bus driver. Yes,
or a bus
right.
driver. But if you want to have an
you're
international student in your home, you don't have to do anything. Except
No, not at all. It's name-based. It's name-based. I remember that it was in 2012 that our organization did look to the State Department to enhance the regulations. And they were met with the exchange industry digging their heels in the ground. And it was the CSIET, Council on Standards for International Educational Travel, that worried about recruitment, how this was going to affect recruitment. When if you speak with the parents, they don't mind spending the 25 or 30 extra dollars to ensure that there is a good host family, ready, willing, and able to host their child.
So we have a student who's basically been gagged. They can't, in now it's, but like in California, we have, we're moving forward in our body safety education and stuff like that.
Yes,
we're encouraging kids to
yes.
come forward and report. And so here you have this poor exchange student who has a language barrier who says, oh, I'm supposed to, it says it's okay to report, but I'm not allowed to report. So what have you seen that happens to these kids who raise their hand and say something's really wrong going on here?
They are pulled aside and chastised. They are threatened. Time and time again, they are told by their local coordinator or the regional director above the coordinator that if you tell anyone, if you speak out about this, especially if you tell anybody at school, we will place a black mark on your visa that will prohibit you from being able to return to the United States to study. And a vast majority of these students, Joelle, their dream is to return to the United States to study. So they are forced into silence. They are not encouraged to speak with their mother or their father. And across the board, there are no longer hundreds, there are thousands of students that I have talked with where they've tried to reach out to their mother or their father, only to have the area representative or the host mother and father within earshot, hearing what the conversation is about, and they cannot speak freely.
I'm absolutely blown away by this conversation. I mean, I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize it was this systemic. And so what's some of the work that you do to help these kids who have been exploited in the exchange programs, and then to help, make sure that the programs get their act together and are safe places for kids to come?
Well, we immediately want to speak with their parent. We get on the phone with the parent of the student. We let them know that we can understand them. Often they're a little hesitant with their command of the English language. We do file complaints with the United States Department of State. We will reach out to that student's consulate from their home country. Sometimes we will also reach out to the placement agency overseas. And so many families are receiving a closed door, and year after year these agencies get sponsored as a proud designated sponsor of the United States Department of State, as well as a member in good standing with CSIET, and the problems continue. There is no oversight. And the regulations, Joelle, that were written to protect these students, they're not even worth the paper they were printed on. Nobody adheres to them, and cases are closed just about as quickly as they've been opened.
So what happens when you go, I assume you go to the Department of State and say, hey, there's a real problem. What kind of response have you received from them?
Very little. Very little. They will respond by sending a link to the federal regulations. And we're very versed with the regulations, so that gets a little tedious receiving that time and time again. They will say they'll speak with the sponsor, and then the sponsor will respond that they can't speak to third parties about this issue. And many times it does make it into the media, which the Department of State cannot tolerate any negative media exposure. But state is complicit with many of its sponsors, and it's shattering the dreams of these kids, and it's ruining the reputation of our country. It really is.
So legislatively speaking, I'm sorry, I'm getting so angry.
No. Oh, you're angry. Yes.
Oh, yeah. So
Yes.
legislatively speaking, have you been able to make any inroads with state or federal legislators about this at all? I mean, I'm sure you tried. Have you been able to make any inroads?
Well, some years ago we did present the the AB 2899 bill in Sacramento. But unfortunately, we were squashed by the industry that circled their wagons and spoke so highly about these agencies that have been in operation 30, 40, 50, 60 years. But what they don't realize is that the patterns of abuse are evident, and there's barely even a slap on the wrist. And with there being no oversight and this being an under-regulated industry, the problems continue year after year.
So do the host families get paid for having this child live with them? Is that the allure of it?
They do not get paid. And sadly, Joelle, predators, pedophiles, have gained access to their next victim courtesy of the exchange industry. They're able to bring up the student's profile and bio and host the student based on knowledge of their background, hair color, and eye color. I remember one time when I was an area representative, my director called me very late at night, and she had this fantastic idea. And she wanted me to wake up early the next morning, make hundreds of copies of the CCI Green Heart Exchange flyers that showed pictures of blonde-haired, blue-eyed students that needed homes. And she wanted me to march into my local pizza parlor and talk with the manager about taping the CCI flyers onto the pizza boxes so that when you get a pizza, you can learn how to bring an exchange student into your home too. That was one of their recruiting methods.
Yeah, I worked a case about 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it was a teacher who he was in California. He was inland California, and he moderated the surf team. And for Californians to hear that someone from this particular high school, had a surf team was kind of funny because it was like a 2-hour drive to the ocean. And he basically used the surf team to abuse kids. And then when he was pushed out, he and his wife hosted exchange students. And nobody saw a problem with that. And I saw a huge problem with that. And we tried to alert the exchange company, and they didn't care. But I'm curious because, like, I look at, so one of the local churches here where my son went to school, they'll host exchange students. And if you want to host a family, you have to go through a security check.
You would think.
Well, and you do, because I thought about it, and I'm like,
sure.
I was just curious to see what would, the issue, how to get a kid. We didn't have enough space in our house anyway. I'm like, oh, good, fingerprinting and all this other stuff. And I'm like, and these other programs can't bother to do what my little Lutheran church here in Orange County does? This is ridiculous.
It is. It is. And you know what's absolutely, undeniably unacceptable is the thousands upon thousands of abuse cases that I can read to you. There was a host father by the name of Frank Sidwerski. He hosted a boy from Vietnam. The boy from Vietnam was given instructions to pound his fist on the shower door 4 times when the water got hot enough. That was the young man that he was told that was his signal so that his host father can join him in the shower. This went on for months. After the shower, there was a massage that ensued, and it was the next day that the boy, during one of his sexual education classes, pulled his teacher aside and said, "Hey, I need to let you know what's going on in the home." And he asked, "Is this typical American behavior?" And they're frightened to speak out because they are so scared about being sent home in shame. And they spend between $18,000 to $30,000, if not more, to come to the United States. And the placement agency that's responsible is still an active and fully registered a participant with the United States Department of State, and they are proud members in good standing with CSIET.
So tell me a little more about this CSIET. What do you have to do to be a member in good standing? Just fill out a form and pay your fee?
The CSIET is a trade group that membership is paid for and not earned. I've had many, many natural parents from across the globe tell me that that CSIET logo that appears on the websites sold them that this had to be a reputable agency because there were standards that needed to be upheld. And CSIET is nothing less than the fox watching the hen house. They too will close cases as quickly as they were opened and point their finger at the State Department to take action, and they don't. We've even filed complaints with the Office of Inspector General, and the Office of Inspector General will perform an investigation and then tell the parent that the case is closed, and if they need additional information, then they're to request what's called a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act. But when they do that, they receive an email from the OIG's office saying, I'm sorry, but you're outside the United States. We can't provide you with any information. So the vicious cycle continues, and it's a game that the students are up against, and they always lose. But what happens, Joelle, is the exchange agencies overseas, they have the money to print these glossy brochures showing happy, happy, smiley students having a fantastic time abroad. And the parents get into the belief that the more money we spend in program fees, yes, this will ensure my son or daughter has a good placement, which it couldn't be further from the truth.
I'm still trying to wrap my arms around this. This is absolutely crazy. How many international exchange students are there in the United States right now, approximately?
Approximately 33,000.
So these are 33,000 kids with no oversight and
absolutely no oversight.
No safety net.
None whatsoever. I'm reminded of my sweetheart, Martin Marisay, whom I shall never forget, and I will do my best to be brief. There was a lot of partying and alcohol in his home in Missouri, and we obtained a 3/4 of an inch thick police report of the police responding to these parties that the family the host parents would have with the students. There was no oversight. Martin did not drink. He just wanted to concentrate on his studies. So he complained to his local coordinator, hey, I can't even sleep at night because of the partying and the constant drinking. Long story short, he was repatriated. He was sent home early through no fault of his own. And the agency, which is SAI, accused Martin of the very thing that he was against, which was drinking. He did not drink. And a week and a half after he was returned to his home country, he took his life. And his mother found him dead in his bedroom 1 week shy of his 18th birthday. Did you know that SAI continues today? And they are one of the top 10 agencies that I believe need to be shut down entirely.
How did you find out about his story?
His father got in touch with me, Peter Marisay.
How do you find out? How do most people get in contact with you and tell you these stories and emails? How do they find you?
We ask because it's important for me to know, how did you find us? And by simply putting need help for exchange student, I'm grateful to say the Committee for Safety of Foreign Exchange Students will pop up on the internet.
So you've monitored these cases now, and I assume, do you monitor U.S. students who go abroad as well? Are you able to help them out?
We have. I'm sorry to say that, and I don't mean to interrupt you, But the case of Tyler Hill will never leave my mind or heart, in that he died a preventable death in Japan as an exchange student, when all his local coordinator needed to do was call for medical help for him. It was recorded in court documents that instead the local coordinator partied in the hotel drinking sake, and he died a preventable death. And there's Jonathan McCullum from Maine, that was an AFS participant that left the United States weighing 155 pounds, and he lost 54 pounds abroad. He got host parents that were Coptic Christians, if I'm not mistaken, and they fasted like crazy. And that was AFS, and AFS is still going strong today.
AFS is a big name. I mean, I recognize AFS.
They're one of the oldest, one of the largest, but not the most corrupt. In my opinion, that would be ASSE and EF Foundation. They should be shut down.
So are there countries or systems that handle this better than we're handling it here in the U.S.?
That's a very good question, and I really don't know, Joelle. I don't. I know that in Denmark, Norway, Spain, France, and Italy, they perform thorough investigations, and then unfortunately, because of the amount of time that passes, I don't want to say the cases get lost, but it's just requires follow-up to find out what happened.
So I'm utterly positive that everyone listening or watching this right now is as angry as I am and is trying to figure out, oh my God. So let's start with how do we, somewhat fix this problem. So you are a parent, you have a high schooler who's like, oh, I want to study in the US, or, oh, I want to study abroad. What do you tell them?
I think that because this is such a big money-making business and there is zero oversight, regulations need to be enforced, and I believe parents should ask very direct questions. For example, who is independently checking on my child? What happens if my child reports a problem? And who can they contact outside the program if they feel unsafe? Because in our experience, safety comes down to oversight and accountability, not just promises that you will see in those glossy brochures.
So what do you think? I mean, what's your top list of things? I mean, if you could change the student exchange system right now, what are the top things you would do?
One would be, we have to scale back on the amount of students that we allow into the United States, because right now and for the last 20 years I have witnessed that there are more exchange students wanting to come to the United States than we have host families for. But it's because of that point system and the bonus incentives that the area representatives receive. It becomes like a pyramid scheme, if you will, that the more students you can commit, the more money you will make. So that's why it's not at all uncommon for up to a dozen exchange students to be residing in their local coordinator's basement. And the one thing these students must not ask is, when am I going to get a host family? Is it something I've done? Is it because I have acne? Or is it because I wear glasses? You just don't know what goes on in these young people's minds. And I would tell parents not to get tied into the misconception of paying crazy high program fees, thinking it's going to ensure their son or daughter has a good time. And I would also like to ask that the agencies stop removing the cell phones from the students. The students will actually take pictures of food that has expired and has gotten moldy in the fridge, or animal feces strewn about the home, and they will send them to their parents, and then As in the case of Lucia from Spain, she sent her parents a picture of the food that she was asked to eat that evening, which just was noodles, just noodles. And the parents tried to get in touch with her that evening, the next morning, the following afternoon, and since they weren't able to get in touch with their daughter and the host mother would not answer the phone, they said taking away the phone would help her adapt, but the parents in Spain flew out of pocket to the United States to make sure their daughter was okay. A formal complaint was sent to the Department of State as well as CSIET, and we have confirmation of both. Case closed. Case closed. And there's not a documenting agency that records these cases.
Another big sigh. So what advice do you have for educators and people who work with foreign exchange students who are here in the U.S.? Because I know that they're educators listening to this saying, oh my God, I have foreign exchange students in my class. Should I say something? I mean, what do you suggest for those people?
We receive so many calls from outstanding school administrators. Some want to remain anonymous by saying, hey, you need to know something. There's this family that can barely feed themselves, that have had run-ins with the law, and they are hosting a girl from Germany, and her grades have begun to decline. What can be done? How can we get the student out of the home? And the placement agencies don't like to answer these calls because they want everything to go smooth sailing. And that's when we get in touch once again with the State Department to try to bring awareness and correct the problem.
So what role would CPS or the police play in this? Because like for a lot of educators, if there's a sign of child abuse or neglect, as mandatory reporters, they have to call CPS or law enforcement, and then they start an internal investigation. And those are two investigations outside of, reporting to CSIET or the State Department.
You're exactly right.
Does that happen much?
It does. And sometimes, once again, I'm sorry to report, the cases are closed before they're really even opened or investigated. But there was one case of 9 foreign exchange students that were placed with convicted felons in residences where there were refrigerators and commodes out in front of the property. It was the Lackawanna County Child Protective Services in Scranton, Pennsylvania, that exposed 9 foreign exchange students placed in deplorable conditions. And that made the CNN investigative report, and it hit the papers. And even then, Aspect Foundation was only fined, I want to say 10 or 15% of students less that they could house or host the following year. And in the case of Herban from Germany, who was sexually molested by his host father, he was an ERDT share participant. And when Brian Williams of the Rock Center did an interview, a full-on investigation about this in 2012, ERDT share went unscathed, and the United States Department of State even congratulated ERDT share for its role, stating that they were able to enhance the federal regulations that are written for these kids.
If a student is in crisis, an exchange student is having issues, an exchange student family is worried about their child, how do they get in contact with you? What's the best?
They get in contact with the Committee for Safety of Foreign Exchange Students very easily. But sometimes by the time they reach us, I'm not ever going to say it's too late, but parents are very smart. They know their children. They know by either the way they smile or don't smile or way the questions are answered, they know something is up. and I want them to believe their student. Even ask them a code word if they have to establish a code word, or tell the student to cough or sniff into the phone if they're being monitored, because they are. The area representatives will sit right there with them and make sure they speak in English and make sure they're telling the parents back home that everything is fine when it is not.
Do you have a safety list for parents who are considering sending their kids abroad? Like a safety checklist?
We also have tips for parents on our website. And the one area in the tips for parents that I have in bold red letters is, in the event that the host family you were promised last minute for any reason, health concerns, divorce, has to move to a different state, and they have to be placed with a different host family, do not send your child, because that sets them up for failure. And that's what these agencies do. They will say that there is a placement, and then, wow, a week or two before departure, inevitably, there's either sickness in the home, or there's a divorce, or there's a change in plans, and that family that they were promised is non-existent to begin with. They're just doing it to get the money, to rake in those program fees. And if, as evidenced by their 990 tax records, they are multi-million-dollar agencies that are allowed to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on those glossy brochures that reel in the parent and reel in the student. And then you'll see there's just a couple $100 spent towards the background checks. And that's once again on GuideStar.com. And this is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
What advice do you have? Because we do have a lot of administrators who listen to this podcast. What advice do you have for school administrators who are hosting foreign exchange students in their campuses?
Trust your instincts. That boy from Japan that came with a 4.2 GPA that's all of a sudden showing up to class tired, maybe has acne on his or her face, grades are declining. Get to the bottom of it. Ask what's going on. Listen to them, and contact CSFES, because in my experience, their calls will fall on deaf ears when they call the placement agency. I will never forget, Joelle, a young boy from Germany witnessed his host father pick his host brother up from the head that was only 2 or 3 years of age in frustration, and he twisted the kid's head, dropped the boy to the floor. The exchange student went to school the next morning and reported it to his counselor. And within 2.5 hours, his local coordinator showed up at the school, demanded that he empty out his locker, and he had a plane waiting for him back to Germany 3 hours later. How dared he speak against his host family like that? And these kids are not dumb. There may be a cultural difference with regards to a proper way to discipline a child, but these kids are not dumb. When they suspect abuse or suspect the severity of a way a student or a child in the home is being treated, they need to speak up.
What advice do you have for a kid right now who might be a foreign exchange student and might be suffering from abuse or neglect here in the U.S.?
Report it. Contact us. Speak to a trusted teacher, school administrator, principal. We receive a lot of calls from parents because their child goes to school with an exchange student, and it was the exchange student that confided in their son or daughter, and then they told the parent, and it's the parent who will call us and say, hey, you know what? The family that they've been placed with has a horrible reputation in town. We don't even know how they got approved in the first place. And there's always the media. The United States Department of State cannot tolerate negative media exposure. So we go straight for the media. We go straight to the consulates. We go straight to politicians overseas to bring awareness to put a stop to these problems.
It's, when I hear you talk, I mean, you bring awareness here, but to the State Department, you want to bring shame, and you want to bring accountability, and you want to bring justice for these poor kids.
Oh, I have thousands now, no longer dozens, no longer hundreds. I have thousands of complaints that we have submitted to the United States Department of State. And it's Darren Beatty right now, Beattie, of the State Department, that is responsible for the ECA division, the Educational Cultural Affairs division of the State Department. And he's done nothing. In my opinion, absolutely nothing.
Danielle, this has been extraordinarily enlightening and completely enraging. And I'm hoping that the listeners will have that same amount of rage that I do about this system. So if people want to get in contact with you, they do it through your website,
please. Committee for Safety of Foreign Exchange Students. You got it.
Okay.
Yes.
And if they email, will that go straight to you or your volunteer team of
Both.
Advocates? Great.
Both. You know what I'm really thankful for too, if I may say, Joelle? In Norway, Italy, Thailand, Taiwan, China, you get the idea. Denmark and Norway, if I haven't said that. Former victims have gone on to translate the CSFES website in their own language for the people of their country to be aware this is what can happen. And they do this to bring awareness, and I can't thank them enough because awareness is what it's all about.
Definitely. Danielle Grijalva from the Committee for Safety of Foreign Exchange Students, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And if you want to get in contact with Danielle, you can do that through her website. If you enjoyed or were as enraged about the content that we had today as I was, please feel free to share this podcast. A 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts will also increase our reach. Thank you so much for listening to the Crossing the Line podcast from the National Center to Stop Educator Sexual Misconduct. And Danielle, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joelle.